Firearms Investigation Unit. We're here to provide an update on the investigation into the origins of the firearm used in the shooting deaths of Constable Brett Ryan and Constable Travis Jordan, as well as the shooting of a man in an Inglewood restaurant a few days prior. Last Thursday, we arrested a 19-year-old Dennis Okima, who was accused of trafficking the firearm used in both shootings, an unrestricted semi-automatic .22 caliber rifle. Our investigation has led us to conclude that shortly before the March 12th restaurant shooting, Okima sold the rifle directly to a 16-year-old youth. And as we know, this youth went on to shoot the innocent man in the restaurant. Constable Jordan, his own mother, and himself. In addition to firearms and drug-related charges, Okima is charged with 3 counts of criminal negligence causing death and the deaths of our 2 police officers, as well as the youth who killed him. He also faces 2 counts of criminal negligence causing bodily harm in the shootings of the youth's mother and the male victim in the restaurant shooting. Okima is also charged with 3 counts of manslaughter for the deaths of the 2 police officers, as well as the self-inflicted shooting death of the 16-year-old male shooter. In my 20 years in this career, this is one of the most complex and tragic investigations I've ever been involved with. A 16-year-old should never have been able to get his hands on a gun, and it's heartbreaking that the trafficking of this rifle to this youth has led to multiple deaths and life-altering injuries, not to mention the trauma suffered by all of the families involved. While nothing can change what's happened, it is our hope that by concluding this investigation, we're able to bring some measure of resolution to these grieving families and to the members of our police family who continue to mourn their colleagues. I'd like to thank the many units of EPS that were involved in this investigation, as well as Alert, Calgary Police Service, and the RCMP for their assistance. I'll now turn it over to the Acting Deputy Chief, Nicole Chapdelaine, of the EPS Investigations and Support Services Bureau. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Good afternoon. 2023 has been a difficult year for the Ryan and Jordan families, our service, and all of our members as we continue to mourn the loss of our colleagues, Constables Brett Ryan and Travis Jordan. Today I want to briefly speak to the impact these events have had on all of us and acknowledge how this update may revive some of the painful feelings we've all been navigating. One of the most difficult things an officer may experience during their career is the death of a colleague. While we are all aware of the dangers that we face each day that we put on our uniform, line of duty deaths will always remain unexpected and hurt us deeply. An acute reminder of our mortality and the risks we as colleagues, an organization, and a family, the deaths of our fellow members, have far-reaching impacts that will take time to heal. For some of our members, the grief remains constant. For others, the healing process has started. The path is not linear and is different for everyone. I can share that our employee and family assistance section continues to be actively engaged in supporting staff through this process. Similarly, the EPS remains in regular contact with the Ryan and Jordan families. Like our officers, they continue to navigate their grief as they come to terms with the tragic loss of their loved ones. As they do so, we will continue to actively support them through this unthinkable tragedy. I'd like to also thank Edmontonians for their ongoing support of the Ryan and Jordan families and the EPS. Your kind words and thoughtful gestures have not gone unnoticed and continue to help us heal our hearts. I'll now ask Chief McPhee to come forward and say a few words before we take questions. Just questions?
I think we can just turn over to questions. The only thing I really would like to comment on is just great work that Staff Sergeant Stewart mentioned by a lot of officers. Obviously, there's an impact of a community, an impact of family, and I think you've heard us speak a lot about the gun violence, in particular some of the tragedies that we're seeing. And this closes some files, at least on how this firearm got into the hands of somebody that obviously committed this tragedy. So this is another piece closed, some closure from the families, but it's really the result of the quality investigation by the men and women of our police service and all those agencies supporting us. And so the thing I have, unless there's some questions for me, is to just show the appreciation for them, because if you could imagine, all of these things are tough and they take a toll on them, and then when you actually know the people that you're involved, it even gets that much tougher. So credit to our men and women, and certainly a good day for the city of Edmonton in relation to holding some accountability into the system. But ultimately, that doesn't change bringing the people back that are hurting. So, or certainly the people that are part of our service, and making it easier for the people that are grieving and still hurting. So I think we'll turn it over to questions, and we've got the expertise here, and certainly just direct the question who you want to ask it to, and we'll go from there. Thanks.
Hi, Nav Sangha, CTV News Edmonton. Can you talk about why you chose to do the manslaughter charges, and are you concerned at all that it might be difficult to prove in court?
Yeah, the manslaughter charges in this case is unique to my time being involved in these types of investigations. It's not the first time that we've had illegal firearms trafficked. You see me talk and hear me talk about straw buying very frequently out here. And, you know, we've had other circumstances where firearms have been sold illegally and used in other tragic events and tragic deaths and other horrific shooting events. What was unique about this investigation is the chain of evidence that allowed us to get to those charges, in particular to the other investigations. We've been able to obtain good evidence in this investigation that allows us to, that makes us investigators believe that Dennis Okima trafficked this firearm to the youth, and then from there these events took place. Without getting into too more details, it's definitely unique in that we had the right evidence in place for that to occur, and you know, in saying that, we consult with Crown on these investigations and every one we do, and they supported these charges too. So we're confident in the charges that we laid in this investigation.
And then in March, you were saying that you were going to search his phone and computer to see if there was any motivation. Where are you at that front? Have you found any motivation for the 16-year-old shooter yet?
With respect to any motivation on the part of the young shooter, we have no evidence to support that he had planned this earlier, or if he had any other intention than that came up other than when it happened, when those officers knocked on the door.
Similar vein, but are there any precedents for a manslaughter charge for someone who's been a trafficker in Edmonton or other jurisdictions? Then, you know, would it have to do with him being, because it was trafficked to a youth, or is there any element because police officers were involved?
Yeah, and I want to make it clear, these charges weren't laid just because we're dealing with our own police officers. Every investigation we go into specific to firearms trafficking, and the events that take place once those firearms are sold, we continue to investigate all those. And there's been opportunities where we've provided evidence to Crown to support charges and other files, but we didn't quite have the evidence to make those linkages. So in this investigation, we had that opportunity and we had that evidence, and it gave us the opportunity to lay those charges. One thing I'll also say too is, you get involved in firearms trafficking and you traffic firearms, like, I think there's no excuses. Like, you ought to know what's going to happen once you put those firearms into somebody's hands that shouldn't have firearms. If you put yourself in that situation and you sell a gun illegally, you ought to know what could happen. This is one of those outcomes that is tragic, and it could happen. It's happened in other events as well.
And just are there any other cases in Canada where you know that this has happened? And then my follow-up question would be, for Okima, is there any other evidence of other trafficking that he's been doing? Does he have a record of this?
I won't get into the investigation. As you can appreciate, it is ongoing. Not to my knowledge do I know of any other files. That being said, I'm not concrete in that answer. Crown would be better to answer that question for you, but specific to my experience, being involved in this types of investigations, it's a first for me.
Similarly, could you explain the process of why it took 8 months to press the charges?
Yeah, so this was a very lengthy, complex investigation. You can appreciate we're working, first of all, with a homicide investigation. We'll back it up. We're working with a shooting investigation that our investigative response teams were working on. And then from there, you fast forward to the homicide investigation. And then from there, we're working with both those investigative units to move forward. And these investigations nowadays are all lengthy. Nothing is quick. Nothing comes fast. You have subject matter experts working on these types of files. We don't move ahead till we have charge approval and Crown approval on these files. We make sure we don't, no stone is unturned till we get to the right point where we can lay charges in these files. So, it's not just this investigation. I would say a lot of investigations are lengthy nowadays.
Sarah Comadino with Global News. Do you happen to know where Okima got this gun? Was that gun stolen, or where did he get his hands on this gun?
Again, the investigation isn't ongoing, but what I can provide you is this firearm was lawfully purchased at some point before it started making its circulation out there in our public. The lawful purchase of it was done on the up and up by a lawful firearms owner. There's no culpability in this investigation. And then from there, we're still investigating exactly how it got to Dennis Okima's hands.
With these manslaughter charges, I guess, would you need to have evidence that Okima would have had to have known that this could have harmed somebody or killed somebody? Just explaining further into that.
Yeah, there's lots of factors that go into it. Obviously, it's not just ought to known. Again, that is a big factor. But there's lots of other factors that go into that. Without getting into too much details, knowledge of the youth around that time of the event, which again, not to provide too much information, but there's other factors besides that definitely will add to our evidentiary chain to lay those types of charges.
So is there evidence from that the youth, the 16-year-old, would have maybe have said something or indicated something that he was wanting to cause harm to other people to this Okima?
We have nothing to say that in our investigation, and nothing from the homicide investigation.
I did have a question about a protest that happened at City Hall earlier today. I'm not sure if you're able to answer.
If we could take those offline. There's just a lineup of folks that want to ask some questions. Thank you.
Jackie Carmichael with the Edmonton Journal. I'm wondering where the lawful purchase of it originally was done. Do you happen to know that?
I won't provide where it was, but it was a lawful firearms retailer.
In Canada?
In Edmonton.
In Edmonton, thank you. The scale of the problem of gun trafficking in either Alberta or Canada, what do we know?
Well, firearms, we're seeing a lot more firearms on our streets, and individuals that are obtaining those firearms are either getting through domestically trafficked situations. Which I mean by that is, I talk about straw buyers or straw purchasers. Someone with a lawful firearms license purchases firearms and then goes and traffics those firearms illegally to someone who doesn't have a firearms license. And there's a small majority of these firearms are coming from break and enters, whether it be retailers or residences, but that's not the common source of these guns ending up here. We are seeing importation on the rise as well from firearms coming from the U.S. To this particular case, this is a domestically trafficked firearm locally.
Do you have any words for people who might be asked or in some position, like a normal gun buyer who might be in a position like, I don't need this gun anymore? What would you tell someone in that situation?
Well, I think my message today isn't about the lawful firearms owner. That community, they sometimes get painted with the wrong brush. The lawful firearms community, for the most part, separate to the straw buying situations, which is a small minority, They follow the rules. They have the licenses. They make the proper sales. That's not what we're speaking about here today. So when we get into trafficking of firearms, I'm not speaking to the lawful gun owner. When I say straw buyer, that's a whole different type of investigation. But the lawful firearms owner follows the rules, and that's what we need them to do.
Carly Robinson with City News. I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. This is not a case of straw purchasing.
That is correct.
Okay. I'm just looking for an update on the 2 surviving victims. We have the Pizza Hut employee, Rich Albert, and the mother of the victims. Are you able to provide anything on it?
Yep.
Pardon me. I'll speak to the surviving victim from the restaurant. He's physically still healing. There's a lot of damage done, and I think some of that will be he'll live with forever. Psychologically, he's still suffering, and it's taken quite a toll on him, and damage manifests itself in a lot of different ways in his life, and I'm sure you could understand. The mother of our shooter, the young person who killed our members, physically she's mostly healed. She's out of hospital, and she has some lasting damage as well, but she's mostly healed. She's in pain. She's got some challenges, and that's got a big ripple effect throughout her family as well, who've been very cooperative with us from the very start of that investigation.
And Sergeant Stewart mentioned that this concludes a section of the investigation. I'm wondering if there are still other investigation ongoing, internal reviews. I know there was mention of a Form 10 with the suspect. Is there any looking back at what happened leading up to this moment?
Okay, well, there's probably a couple questions in that, so I'll maybe start with our homicide investigation into the deaths of our members has been concluded. As Staff Sergeant Stewart mentioned, the investigation into the firearms trafficking in this case is for the most part been concluded, but we never quite know, which is why we're being a little bit hesitant to provide too many details or get into the weeds, because we could go further. I think your other part of your question there was about any kind of review process. You might be talking about like a fatality inquiry. Sometimes fatality inquiries are ordered by a justice minister to look into higher profile or deaths that maybe could have been prevented or need a little bit more scrutiny. In this case, that has not been ordered. There's no fatality inquiry ordered. Throughout our investigation, pardon me, which was very thorough, our homicide investigation, we of course looked at our response and all of the response of all of the police officers and supporting crews, and we're satisfied that everything was done properly and there's no obvious need for a review. I will speak to ACERT as well. At the time ACERT was involved, the Director of Law Enforcement in Alberta did order ACERT to become involved, but it was in an oversight capacity as opposed to investigative capacity like they often are, just to shadow the homicide investigation to make sure that it was done objectively, thoroughly, and just to give the public a little bit more confidence that the police were above board in their response. And they concluded that and determined that police had no wrongdoing in the death of the shooter.
Is Okima's trafficking at all gang related? And sorry if I missed that.
Yeah, we have no information to suggest Dennis Okima is involved in any kind of gang organized crime group at all.
Do you happen to know how many guns or other trafficking he had done prior to this?
We have no information to suggest he's involved in other firearms trafficking that we've been able to reveal yet. What I can say is when we searched his residence, we did locate a loaded handgun inside that residence. What he was going to do with that, I can't tell you. But there's no other information to suggest that we have at this time that this was an ongoing thing.
How did he advertise? How did he get it out there that he had these guns and was finding?
You know, what we see in this is there's no real, the advertising is word of mouth. We believe that Dennis Okima was involved in drug trafficking. What we see in drug trafficking investigation, there's an escalation at some point if they choose to become involved in firearms possession, illegal firearms possession, and if they escalate further to illegal firearms trafficking. And I think this is one of those cases where we've seen it before, where you start as a firearms or as a drug trafficker, and you know, opportunity arises. It's all about money, and that's what they're there to do, is make money. I think that's what happened in this case.
And do we know how the 16-year-old got in touch with Okima?
I can't provide that right now because our investigation is still ongoing. The firearms investigation, this investigation today, is ongoing and still will be ongoing until we get to court.
That's right. I just wanted to know if he was known to police.
Not until this investigation.
Is there additional questions?
Do you know how many layers of hands the gun went through before it got to Dennis's hands?
I will say we have a pretty good idea, but I can't provide those details today. As you can appreciate, like I said, this investigation is ongoing. More than one.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any final questions there?
I'm just wanting to really clarify this. Was there a prior relationship to this trafficking between the 16-year-old and Okima?
We believe they knew each other prior at some point. Again, not getting into all the details, but they knew of each other.
So can't give any indication?
Not right now, sorry. Yeah.
Was he in high school at the time, Okima?
No, Okima was an adult. He was out of school.
All right, any final questions there? Thank you very much for coming today.
I did want to ask the chief about this protest.